In the quiet of an ordinary evening, what was supposed to be a simple dinner turned into the beginning of a transformation neither of them saw coming. One unexpected proposal, an open marriage, shattered the illusion of stability they had built over the years. The idea seemed absurd at first, a distant fantasy, yet when the words were spoken with such certainty, it left him spiraling. What if this wasn't just a whim? What if their carefully constructed life was already more fragile than he realized? Torn between his own desires and the fear of losing everything, he reluctantly agreed. But each day that followed began to erode the very foundation of their relationship. As she embraced new freedoms, he found himself confronting the most painful question of all. Could they survive the fallout, or was this the end of everything they had known? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So let's get started. Dinner ran late that night. We didn't have anything fancy, just warmed up leftovers from the night before. She chose the seat opposite mine at the kitchen table, her face set in a way I couldn't quite place. For a brief second, I assumed she wanted to revisit the topic of the loan I'd promised for her business, maybe to clarify some final details. My mind was already racing ahead, caught up in figures, timelines, and repayment schedules. I never suspected that the real conversation would be something entirely different. Breaking the quiet, she finally spoke. Can we talk? This matters. I placed my fork down, giving her my full attention, a sinking feeling beginning to form. Her reluctance to meet my eyes triggered a sense of dread, as if I already knew whatever was coming would shake up everything I thought was stable. Without much preamble, she finally dropped the real subject. She wanted us to consider making our marriage open. My first reaction was laughter, not out of amusement, but disbelief. I honestly thought she was joking and waited for her to smile or say she was kidding. But her face remained serious. She held my gaze, anxiety and determination flickering in her expression. I asked her to repeat herself, desperately hoping I'd heard wrong. But she said it again, unmistakably and with conviction. She wanted us to explore an open relationship. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I must have double-checked with her more than once to be sure, and every time she affirmed she meant it. She explained she'd mulled over the idea for some time. It wasn't that our marriage was failing, she said, just that things had grown a bit too monotonous, like eating the same meal day after day. It was satisfying, but sometimes people crave something new. That metaphor stuck with me, mostly because it made everything sound so simple, like she was merely suggesting a new dinner recipe, not a fundamental change to our marriage. I asked if this was her way of giving me an ultimatum. She denied it, but her eyes said otherwise. I tried to keep my composure, though my thoughts were in complete disarray. Was I no longer enough for her? Had I overlooked warning signs? I mentally replayed our recent moments together, each embrace and every shared joke, questioning if any of it had held true meaning for her. When I finally managed to ask why she was raising this now, she assured me it wasn't because of anything I'd done wrong, but because she longed for new experiences. She confessed that some of her co-workers at the salon had talked about their own open relationships, and ever since, the thought had lingered with her. That admission stung. The realization that this wasn't a deeply personal epiphany, but something borrowed from casual workplace conversation. I wanted to be angry, but mostly I just felt adrift. She told me she wasn't asking for more freedom only for herself. She'd be comfortable with me seeing other people too, as if that would somehow balance things. I asked her what would happen if I said no. She hesitated before finally saying, "Then I won't be happy." That was what broke me. It wasn't just the words, but the way she delivered them, like her contentment now rested entirely on my willingness to overturn the foundation we'd built. I didn't respond that evening. I told her I needed time to process everything, and she agreed. Yet afterward, she was almost serene, detached, as though she already believed the outcome was certain, that I'd inevitably say yes. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying our exchange over and over. No matter how I tried to rationalize it, one thought persisted. There was no undoing this choice. Crossing that line meant nothing would be the same again. Still, some small part of me wondered, what if she was right? What if this really was the change we needed? That uncertainty was more haunting than anything else. When morning came, I half hoped the whole thing had been a nightmare. But it wasn't. She behaved as though everything was perfectly normal, making coffee, browsing her phone, as if our relationship hadn't been completely upended. I couldn't decide if her calm made things easier or harder. A part of me wanted her to be as shaken as I was, but she seemed completely unaffected. I moved through my workday in a daze, pretending to focus while my mind kept returning to our conversation. I wanted to believe we could work it out, that she might realize how deeply this hurt, or that I could persuade her to reconsider for the sake of what we had. But each time I remembered her saying, "Then I won't be happy," it felt as though the decision had already been made. When I got home, she was waiting for me, not confrontational, but clearly expecting an answer. I wasn't ready to give one. I stalled, asking more questions, trying to grasp what she was hoping to solve, if she might possibly change her mind. She wouldn't budge. She explained she'd already thought through the rules that would keep everything manageable. No bringing partners home, no involvement with mutual friends, and no sharing details unless we both agreed. It was clear she'd been considering this much longer than I'd realized. I asked her if there was someone she was already interested in. That question struck a nerve. She insisted there wasn't, but the defensiveness in her reaction made it hard to trust her answer. And at that moment, I finally understood just how little control I actually had. She had set everything in motion, and I was only just catching up. The worst part was, I said yes, even though every instinct told me to refuse. Inside, I was desperate to say no, but the fear of losing her completely paralyzed me. After sharing more than 10 years together, I couldn't bear the idea of it all ending. So I went along with it, not out of desire, but out of fear for what might happen if I didn't. As soon as I relented, I could see the relief wash over her. That hurt more than anything, the way she beamed at me, as though I'd done her a favor. I wanted to scream, to somehow make her understand the agony she'd put me through. Instead, I bit back my words and nodded, letting her embrace me as though everything was fine. In the days that followed, I forced myself to pretend as if nothing in our lives had shifted. I kept telling myself this wouldn't be permanent, that her curiosity would run its course and she'd return to me. Part of me hoped that by playing along, I could show her how much I cared, enough that she might realize she didn't want anyone else. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like survival. I was barely keeping afloat, desperate for some sort of clarity before things fell apart completely. As time went on, resentment started to fester, not only toward her, but also toward myself. I hated how easily I'd let her lead me into this situation. I couldn't stand watching her thrive with new experiences while I felt frozen with anxiety. The worst part was the persistent question echoing in my mind. What if, against all odds, I found myself enjoying it too? I tried to shut that thought down, but it always managed to surface again. Even though the idea of sharing her filled me with disgust, a tiny part of me wondered what it would feel like to finally let go, to stop obsessing over her happiness and start thinking about my own needs. Of course, I never voiced any of this to her. Instead, I kept my feelings hidden, playing the role expected of me and hoping I'd find answers before everything unraveled. But somewhere deep inside, I already sensed that we'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The first weeks slipped by in a blur. I went through the motions, pretending things were normal when they clearly weren't. Meanwhile, she seemed to light up, like she'd rediscovered a part of herself she'd long forgotten. She began spending more time out, dressing up in ways she hadn't in years. I tried at first to ignore it, but it was impossible not to see the renewed attention she was giving to her looks, effort she hadn't shown for me in ages. I tried to bury myself in work, but anxiety gnawed at me constantly. Every time she walked out the door, I wondered where she was going, who she'd be with, what was happening. I despised how obsessive I'd become, but I couldn't help it. Each night she was out, it felt like I was losing a piece of her. Then, something shifted. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, I stayed late at the office to finish up some grading. An acquaintance from another department, a familiar face but never more than that, dropped in. We ended up talking for hours about everything from academic research to future plans. It was purely friendly, nothing suggestive or inappropriate. That night, as I walked out of the building, I realized a burden had lifted from my shoulders. That sense of relief lingered. Over the following days, I started reaching out more, making genuine efforts to connect with people I usually just passed by. I wasn't looking to retaliate or prove a point. I just desperately needed something to stabilize me, something to stop the spiral I was trapped in. And to my surprise, it actually helped. What started as casual chats evolved into after-work drinks. Those outings soon led to invitations to events and gatherings. Before long, I found myself surrounded by a new group of friends, people who saw me as an individual, not just as someone's partner. My confidence grew almost overnight. I stopped sitting at home, waiting for my wife's return. Suddenly, I had my own plans, my own circle, and, if I'm honest, possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider before. She noticed. At first, she seemed happy for me, asking about my new activities and the people I was meeting, but that soon changed. The more I embraced my new life, the more unsettled she seemed. Everything shifted when I received an invitation to a conference. The conference was out of town, and a female colleague I'd grown close to, strictly on a professional level, invited me to attend, as she would be presenting there. I accepted. The look on my wife's face when I told her is something I'll never forget. She didn't say a word, but the silence that settled between us spoke volumes. For the first time, she saw me as someone who no longer needed her approval. The conference proved to be a turning point. I built relationships that were valuable for my career and experienced, for the first time in years, what it felt like to be appreciated for who I was, not just for my role at home. When I returned, I could sense something had shifted in her too. She didn't ask about the conference itself, only about the people I'd met, particularly the colleague who had invited me. I told her the truth, but the unease was obvious. From that point on, it felt like our roles had reversed. She started questioning my schedule, curious and sometimes even suspicious about where I was and who I was with. The confidence she'd shown at the start of this whole arrangement was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I'd never seen before. I have to admit, for a short while, I enjoyed seeing her experience the uncertainty I'd lived with for so long. But that feeling didn't last. Even as I built a better, more independent version of myself, I could see the distance between us growing. I tried to convince myself it was just a rough patch, something we'd get through together, but deep down I was starting to realize that I no longer wanted to return to the way things had been. She began keeping closer tabs on me, asking about my plans, my whereabouts, the people I spent time with. She tried to act casual, as if we were just chatting, but it was obvious she was fishing for information. Initially, I didn't think much of it. After all, this whole setup had been her idea. Maybe she simply needed time to adjust to seeing me genuinely happy for once. But as our conversations continued, her questions became sharper, more deliberate. She pressed for details, who I hung out with, how I met them, what we talked about. This wasn't mere interest. Her anxiety was starting to show, and I noticed it every time we spoke. One night, I arrived home later than usual, having had a couple of drinks with colleagues, one of whom happened to be a woman I'd recently gotten to know at a conference. Nothing inappropriate occurred, but that wasn't how my wife interpreted things. When I walked in, she was on the couch, arms crossed, eyes locked onto me the second I entered. "Who were you out with?" she demanded. I answered her. I kept my response brief. Just co-workers, just drinks, nothing special. That didn't satisfy her. She wanted to know more. Who sat next to me? How late did I stay? Did I end up talking to any women? I stayed calm, but made it clear I wasn't going to submit to an interrogation. She took offense. "I thought we promised to be honest with each other," she shot back. I reminded her that being truthful wasn't the same as monitoring every move the other person made. Wasn't the whole point of this open marriage idea supposed to be about freedom, about letting go of restrictions? She didn't respond. Instead, she just looked at me, close to tears, before saying, "I don't think I want to do this anymore." I let out a laugh, not because I found it amusing, but because I'd seen this coming for some time. Naturally, she didn't want to keep going now. Not when I was the one who seemed to be thriving, while she stayed home, wondering what I was doing. But I didn't voice that. Instead, I asked her why. She confessed it wasn't working out the way she'd imagined. She missed the way we used to be, hated the growing gap between us. She admitted she'd hoped that opening our relationship would rekindle something between us, that it might add excitement and fix what was missing. I sat and listened as she let everything out, how afraid she was of losing me, how she regretted ever suggesting this path in the first place. The only thing running through my mind was how quickly she wanted to change the rules once things stopped working in her favor. I asked her whether this was really about our relationship, or if it just bothered her to see me happy on my own. That hit a sore spot. She fired back, accusing me of selfishness, of using this new arrangement to boost my ego instead of repairing what we'd lost. She said I was coming home late on purpose, paying more attention to my appearance, acting as if I thought I was better than her. That accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it made me realize how far apart we'd become. She didn't view me as her partner anymore. Instead, I felt like she saw me as a rival. I told her I'd consider closing the marriage, but inside, I already knew my answer. I wasn't ready to give up the new life I was starting to build outside of our relationship. The truth was, I wasn't sure I even wanted to repair things anymore. I think she could tell, because she started crying. Real, heartbreaking tears that make you feel like the villain, no matter how justified you feel. It hurt to see her so upset, but I couldn't shake the thought that her tears were only coming, now that things weren't going the way she wanted. I didn't have the energy for another argument, so I told her we could talk more in the morning. But as I lay in bed, listening to her try to muffle her sobs, it hit me. Whatever we once had was already gone, and nothing she said could bring it back. The next morning, something between us had changed. We barely spoke as we got ready, and I didn't push it. Honestly, I was relieved by the silence. Even at work, though, I couldn't escape the feeling that we were on the brink of something final. It was as if we were both waiting for the last push to send everything tumbling. That push arrived about a week later. By then, I'd discreetly started looking into divorce lawyers just to understand my options. I hadn't made up my mind to end things, but I needed to be prepared. Meanwhile, she was trying to act as if everything was fine. She made dinner more often, left notes in my lunch, even suggested we take a weekend trip together. But everything felt forced, and I think that's why none of it made a difference. I couldn't erase what had already taken place. I couldn't forget the nights she went out while I stayed home, feeling left behind. And I definitely couldn't overlook how anxious she became the moment I began to enjoy my own life. The final straw came when she brought up closing the marriage once more. This time, she wasn't just asking, she was begging. She told me she couldn't go on like this, that she wanted things to go back to how they used to be. I told her no. I didn't yell. I wasn't angry. I just said no, and watched as she completely fell apart. She accused me of dragging things out just to hurt her, certain that I was going out of my way to cause her pain. I tried to make her see that wasn't my intention. I wasn't seeking revenge. Honestly, I had simply lost faith that anything between us could truly be mended. That evening, she left in a fury, slamming the door as she went. Once I was alone, I started making calls. Within a few days, I'd secured an attorney and initiated the process to formally end things. Delivering the divorce papers to her was one of the hardest moments of my life. No matter what had gone on, she never anticipated it would come to this. She thought we were still working to fix our relationship, so when I handed her the envelope, she just stared at it in shock, unable to accept that it was real. Then her composure crumbled. I left the house, knowing my presence would only make things worse, but it was too late for anything to change. When I returned, chaos greeted me. Plates had been shattered, important documents were ripped apart, and a few of my watches had been destroyed. She had even taken a knife to one of my favorite pairs of dress shoes. Before touching anything, I carefully documented the scene, snapping photos and recording videos as evidence, then reached out to my lawyer. He told me to keep calm and let him handle the fallout, but that was easier said than done. She refused to leave the house, so I packed up a few necessities and moved in with a friend for the time being, hoping things would eventually calm down. I couldn't stop dwelling on what had been wrecked, not just my possessions, but everything we'd built together. By the time we were in court, whatever guilt I'd felt had faded away. In front of the judge, she tried to paint herself as the victim, accusing me of shutting her out emotionally and insisting I'd used our open marriage to degrade her. She even alleged abuse, but when pressed for evidence, photos, documentation, anything, she came up empty-handed. My lawyer picked apart her claims methodically, presenting texts that proved I never wanted an open relationship, but had gone along with it for her sake. He presented evidence of the damage she had done and reminded the court of the financial support I had consistently provided for her business. By the time the proceedings ended, she seemed utterly defeated, as though she already knew she'd lost. The verdict went in my favor. I kept the house. She was held liable for the damages and there was no alimony. Even my legal fees were covered. Stepping out of the courthouse, I felt oddly detached. A burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had lifted. Yet, despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a faint sadness. Not because I missed her, but because it was painfully clear that what we had was truly gone. That understanding hit me harder than I'd expected. Leaving the courthouse felt like closing one chapter and stepping into an entirely new life. What surprised me most was the calm. No anger, no bitterness, just a profound sense of relief, as if I was finally able to breathe after years of suffocating. Later that day, I returned to the house alone. She had already moved out, making things simpler, but it was strange to enter what used to be our shared home and realize it was now mine alone. Her things were gone, but traces of her lingered, the faint scent of her perfume, photographs still on the wall, little notes left on the fridge. I expected the house to feel desolate, but instead, it felt lighter. The first thing I did was remove the pictures. It wasn't out of resentment. I just didn't need them anymore. Then I started cleaning up the mess she'd left. I wanted the space to represent a new beginning, not serve as a shrine to what had fallen apart. I hadn't realized how much I'd been weighed down until that weight finally vanished. For the first time in ages, I wasn't obsessed with fixing things, making her happy, or holding our lives together. I finally had room to focus on myself, and I did. I poured myself into work. I began seeking out new collaborations, broadening my connections, and pursuing opportunities I'd previously set aside for her needs or ambitions. I started attending more conferences, met new people, and built relationships that felt genuine rather than just obligatory. To my surprise, my social circle actually grew. The friendships I'd developed during the open marriage phase didn't fade away. If anything, those connections only became stronger. They weren't just ways to fill the emptiness. They turned into true, enduring friendships. I didn't jump into dating right away, even though I easily could have. I wasn't in any rush. I needed time to rediscover myself outside the context of that marriage before inviting anyone else into my life. That didn't stop her from reaching out now and then. Occasionally, she'd text me, usually under the pretense of sorting out some practical detail, but it always veered into nostalgia or subtle questions about my life. It was clear she hoped for something more, but I kept my distance. The last time we spoke, she admitted she regretted everything. She told me she despised what she'd become and confessed that she still loved me. I didn't know what to say, so I kept things polite and brief. I wasn't angry anymore, but I had no interest in reviving any hope between us. Looking back, it's startling how much life can change in a single year. 12 months ago, I was wearing myself out, trying to rescue a marriage that was beyond saving. Now, I finally feel in control of my own life. I won't pretend the transition was flawless. There are still moments when I reflect on our time together and wonder if things could have gone another way. But then, I remember all the effort I poured in and how little came back in return. I harbor no remorse over my departure. In fact, if I feel any regret at all, it's only that I didn't choose to walk away sooner. The truth is, it wasn't the open marriage that caused our separation. It merely exposed the gap that had already formed between us. We had become strangers living under the same roof, unwilling to acknowledge how far apart we'd grown. When it comes to what lies ahead for her, it's not something I dwell on or let occupy my thoughts. What's truly important is that I've finally reached a place in my life where I don't have to explain myself or give up who I am just to satisfy someone else's expectations. That sense of autonomy is something I intend to hold on to, now and always. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you? Every patience has its breaking point, especially when betrayal cuts deep and the truth turns out filthier than any garbage. She spoke of freedom, of open relationships, of finding herself. But behind those words hid someone else's touch, corporate elevators filled with secret kisses. He was just a sanitation worker, in every sense of the word. While she dreamed of a brighter life, he kept working, asking no questions, until he had to. Then came the call, the business card in her purse, a stranger's name, unfamiliar perfume. And if someone chose to play dirty, he knew exactly how to respond, with real, literal dirt. Address, check, plan, ready. The stench of revenge, it turns out, is no less potent than the stink of betrayal. And soon, no SUV, no glossy facade, no shiny illusions will be left standing. Just one night, one decision, and the city will learn what revenge really looks like when it's served hot and straight from a septic tank. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now let's get started. Victor balanced himself on the worn edge of their threadbare couch, its cushions sagging under the weight of years. The living room, dim and muted, was awash in slanted beams of dusty light filtering through bent blinds. The air between him and Trisha buzzed with an unspoken tension, a fragile silence that hadn't existed just days ago. She paced behind the low coffee table, arms wrapped around herself like armor. "This isn't enough for me anymore," she said, her voice tight, laced with something unfamiliar, an edge of desperation. "I've been thinking about it for a long time," she added, barely above a whisper. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine." Victor looked up, his fingers drumming anxiously against his leg. "So what? You're saying you want to bring other people into this?" The words tasted foreign, absurd, even as he said them. "You think that'll help?" Trisha pressed a palm to her forehead, as if trying to massage the thought away. "Yes," she said, though her voice wavered. "I know it sounds crazy, but we're about to get married, and we've only ever been with each other. I'm terrified of feeling trapped, like I missed out. I want to feel open. He stared at her long enough for the motes of dust in the sunlight to seem frozen in place. And I'm just supposed to accept that? He said quietly. You spring this on me 2 weeks before the wedding, and now you're talking about sleeping with other men? I'm not talking about flings or meaningless hookups, she said quickly, irritation flaring in her tone. This isn't about being reckless. People do this. Open relationships, polyamory. It's a way to grow, not break apart. Or it's how people implode, he murmured, a sardonic smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. Let's not pretend it's some enlightened path for everyone. Trisha's eyes narrowed. She'd always been outspoken, sometimes verging on sanctimonious. So I'm not allowed to ask for what I need? Don't I get a say in how our marriage looks? Victor felt the heat rise in his chest and forced it down. You say open, but what you mean is you want freedom. And I'm the one who's supposed to stay grounded. That's not what I'm saying, she snapped, lifting her chin, her dark hair falling back like a lash. It's different for women. Of course it is, he said bitterly. You get to explore your options, rediscover yourself. If I even suggest the same, suddenly I'm some heartless traitor. But if you do it, it's empowering. I still love you, Victor, she said, softer now, as if willing him to believe it. But I need more than just us to feel whole. He buried his face in his hands, dragging his fingers through his hair with a sigh that sounded more like a wound. Do you hear yourself? You want to break the rules before we've even written them, and you want me to clap for it? You always told me to be honest, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Well, this is me being honest. I can't live my life feeling like it's confined. He let out a dry, disbelieving laugh. So now marriage is a prison? She stood taller, hands on her hips like a challenge. Is it wrong to want both? A husband who loves me and the freedom to explore? Most people would say yes, it is wrong, Victor said, his voice cold and flat. And maybe those same people would say marrying you is a mistake. The blow landed, her eyes widened as if he'd struck her. What's that supposed to mean? He rose to his feet, the couch groaning beneath him, the coffee table trembling from the sudden motion. It means, if this is where we're at right now, maybe we shouldn't be walking into a lifetime together. You can't just cancel everything, she yelled, stepping in front of him like a barricade. Our families have invested so much. My mom would never forgive me. And your dad? He laughed again, a hollow sound with no joy in it. So this is about your mom's pride now? Not about what we want? She jabbed a finger into his chest. Don't turn this around on me. I'm trying to be transparent. Isn't that what you always said you wanted? Truth over pretending? Yeah, I did say that, he said icily. But I never thought the truth would be that you're incapable of commitment. Her face tensed, but she didn't argue. Fine, he said, stepping back. Let's see if I can handle it. Let's see if I can smile while you head off for drinks with someone from work, or get cozy with a stranger at the gym while I stay home playing the loyal fool. Maybe that's what you've always wanted, a partner who doesn't push back. She stared at him with fire in her eyes, but said nothing to deny it. Instead, she turned away and walked to the window. The silence that followed was thick and brittle, like static humming between them. They were out of words. In the days that followed, their routines twisted around each other, avoiding the fracture but never mending it. Trisha threw herself into wedding preparations, calls to venues, chasing florists, approving seating charts, as if everything was perfectly intact. Victor went through the motions, nodding at the right moments, but inside he was seething, barely holding himself together. He watched her more closely now and caught glimpses of someone he no longer recognized, colder, more removed, like she was already somewhere else. One evening she came home late, home. Her excuses stumbled out, an overtime shift, delays, Last-minute chaos, but Victor saw the loose buttons on her blouse, the color in her cheeks, the tousled hair that didn't match her story. A seed of suspicion took root, sharp and invasive. And that night, Victor made a decision. He had to know the truth. "Hey, Trisha," he said casually. "How about we treat ourselves to dessert tonight? That spot you love over on the east side?" She hesitated, visibly caught off guard. "I'm completely drained," she said, tossing her purse onto the table near the door. "Not tonight. I need a shower, then bed." He gave a stiff nod, trying to mask his disappointment with a sympathetic smile. "Of course." She disappeared into the bathroom, and within moments, the rush of water echoed through the apartment. The instant the door latched, he made a beeline for her purse. His hand rifled through the contents until it brushed a smooth business card. Michael Barton, Regional Director, Apex Innovations. On the back, in her handwriting, a scrawled message. "Had a great time." Victor stared, heart hammering. "So it's not just in my head," he muttered. "She's really doing this." He slipped the card back into its place with deliberate care and stepped away, head pounding, rage threatening to explode behind his eyes. He imagined her meeting up with this Michael Barton, probably sneaking off after work. His body tensed, ready to confront her right then and there, but something stopped him. A sliver of uncertainty about his own reactions, about whether he could control himself. Still, if she really was involved with this guy, and judging by the title, Michael was no small player, then he needed proof. Over the next few days, Victor kept a close watch. She came home wearing a scent that was expensive and unfamiliar. She slipped into the bedroom for private phone calls, voice low. One night, she casually dropped the name into conversation. "Michael's such a visionary," she said, practically glowing. "He's been helping me level up my marketing skills. I feel like I'm finally hitting my stride, professionally." The pride in her voice made Victor's stomach churn. He couldn't think of anything else. The thought of her betrayal consumed him. If she wanted to explore other options, why not just admit it? Did she think he couldn't connect the dots? The insult of her secrecy hit harder than the act itself. He barely slept, his days a blur of suspicion and torment. And then, by sheer accident, the opportunity presented itself. Victor was in the kitchen, hunting for a drink, when her phone rang on the couch. She'd left it unattended. Curiosity gripped him. He crossed the room. The screen lit up. Michael. Then again, Michael. Without hesitation, he picked up the call and pressed the phone to his ear, saying nothing. A relaxed, smooth voice came through. Michael didn't realize he'd been answered. "Trisha," he said with a lazy chuckle. "Still thinking about earlier? What you said about being done with the whole fiancé act? Damn." Then a soft laugh. "It's exciting. Let's meet at my place tomorrow." Victor's blood ran cold. He froze, staring into the middle distance as the truth washed over him like ice. Then, "Trisha, you there?" A pause. "Hello?" Victor hung up, hand shaking. The phone landed on the cushion just as Trisha walked out of the bedroom in sweatpants and a baggy tee, eyes narrowing as she spotted his expression. "Who was that?" she asked, gaze flicking to the phone in his hand. His face must have said it all, the color drained from hers. "Victor, did you answer my phone?" "I did," he said, his voice low and tight. "Michael called. Seems like he's pretty comfortable." She opened her mouth to respond, then shut it, then tried again. I can explain. He's your boss, right?" Victor's tone was flat. "Senior exec, helping you with your career." Her voice cracked slightly. "He's been mentoring me, yes. Mentoring you on how to cheat." Victor let out a cold, bitter laugh. "Got it. So that's why you were pushing for an open relationship. You'd already crossed the line." She reached toward him instinctively, but he stepped back. "You don't understand," she said, urgency rising. "Okay, yes, I was attracted to him. That's why I brought up the idea. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. It was meant to start as a conversation. Spare me, he snapped. You weren't opening a dialogue. You were already deep in it. That's not polyamory. That's betrayal. Her frustration flared. Don't play the victim, she spat. I told you I wasn't happy. You laughed it off. You made your garbage route your priority and told me to be patient. Michael sees something in me, she went on. He treats me like I matter, not like I'm supposed to wither into some washed-out wife with nothing to show for her life. Victor clenched his jaw, fury trembling beneath the surface. So that's it? He's your salvation? Yes, she said, arms crossed, her voice cool now. And honestly, I regret saying anything at all. If I'd kept my mouth shut, we'd be married by now, and I'd still be doing whatever I wanted on the side. Maybe then everyone would finally feel satisfied. He remained still, her frosty words hanging in the air like morning ice. You know what? He said quietly. You and Michael, you're a flawless match. Her eyes narrowed with a cutting sharpness. I won't be lectured by a man so proud he's blind to the truth. I needed something more than this monotony, she went on. Something beyond sitting here waiting for you to bring life into this relationship. Something that never came. Victor let out a hard breath, his lungs constricted by the urge to explode, but he held it in. Instead, he pivoted, grabbed his coat from the hook, and muttered, That's it. The wedding's done. He strode toward the door, adding, Forget about the deposit your folks paid. I'll handle it. You can tell yours why there won't be a ceremony. He brushed past her without a second glance, leaving her frozen and silent in the middle of the room. Outside, the chill slapped him in the face, but it couldn't compare to the tempest raging inside his chest. That was when Victor knew. He didn't just want out. He wanted revenge. Trisha's smugness echoed in his head, repeating itself like a taunting refrain. Sleep never came that night. Instead, visions of her and Michael Barton danced behind his eyes, fueling a deeper, darker fury. Michael, polished to a shine, always dressed in crisp suits, driving that gleaming black SUV. Victor remembered the photo she'd once shown him, an ostentatious vehicle with tinted windows and plush leather seats. He could see her now, riding shotgun, laughing at Michael's rehearsed one-liners. The image churned his stomach. By dawn, he was hunched over his phone, digging through property databases for Michael's address. This is insanity, he whispered. Just let it go. But he couldn't. Her contempt had latched onto him like a hook in flesh. The more he brooded, the deeper the desire for payback rooted itself. He wasn't some disposable groom she could toss aside and forget. By the time he stepped out that morning, he knew where Michael lived, a high-end, secured complex nestled in the city's most elite district. Gated entry, patrolling guards, a fortress in suburbia. But Victor had an edge. Working for the sanitation department meant access to industrial vehicles, massive trucks designed to vacuum waste from septic systems and portable toilets. He'd manned them before. The stench was infamous, but you got used to it. Or, as he muttered to himself with a grim smile, you learned how to weaponize it. Over the next few days, he kept watch from a distance, noting Trisha's schedule, especially the nights she worked late. An online tip confirmed that Michael would be hosting a visiting business associate on Friday. He'd be away for hours. More than enough time. Victor wasn't interested in a petty prank. He wanted destruction, something foul, unforgettable. A mess they'd never be able to wipe clean from memory. Thursday night, Trisha barged in past 9 p.m. She hadn't seen Victor in days. She found him in the living room, shoving clothes into a duffel with boxes stacked neatly beside the door. Victor, she said softly. Can we talk? He didn't look up. There's nothing left to say, he muttered, yanking the zipper closed. I've got my own future to take care of. She crossed her arms and stepped closer. My parents are furious you canceled the wedding, she said. They think you should pay them back. It's not fair that I cover everything. You think I should cover the cost of a wedding you blew up? His voice was calm but frigid. That's a joke. She rolled her eyes. Don't twist this. You were the one who wouldn't change. If you'd just listened, maybe we could have worked it out. He faced her, expression turning to stone. Work it out? While you're sneaking around with your boss, calling me pathetic behind my back? She flushed, brushing hair behind her ear. I never called you pathetic, she said defensively. You didn't need to, he shot back. You think I'm going to stand here while you trample over everything we built? Her composure cracked. You know what? She said, voice shaking. I'm tired of justifying myself. You've always been so small, Victor, content with your little sanitation job. Maybe that's all you'll ever be. She straightened her shoulders. I want more, and Michael gets that. He stepped forward, anger pulsing off him in waves. She recoiled slightly but held her head high. Well, Victor said through clenched teeth, I wish you and Michael all the best. Just don't come running when it crashes and burns. She scoffed, voice laced with venom. It won't. Michael's 10 times the man you are. He smirked. Perfect. You belong together. She spun on her heel and slammed the door behind her. Victor stood motionless, fists tight, eyes closed. Fury and heartbreak twisted through him like wildfire. That's it, he whispered. No more. Friday night fell. The truck he'd checked out rumbled through the dark streets, its tank sloshing with rancid waste drawn from a clogged restaurant septic system. The odor alone could break a person. But for Victor, this was just the beginning. The odor was vile, so thick it made Victor's stomach churn. He cranked all the truck windows down, letting the cold night air rush in, but even then, the stink lingered. He didn't mind. In fact, he embraced it. One kind of filth was a fitting answer to another. Navigating through the city's shadowy streets, he watched the dim streetlights shimmer off the corroded metal tank hitched behind the vehicle. It was a few minutes past 10 when he rolled up to the gated, high-end community. As he predicted, the gate guard barely looked up, giving the truck a casual once-over before returning to his screen. Probably thought it was some kind of late-night utility call. Victor muttered something vague about plumbing trouble, and the guard, uninterested, waved him in. Michael's mansion sat deep within the neighborhood, at the end of a carefully manicured lane, flanked by sculpted hedges and warm, ambient lighting. The house itself was a modern marvel, glass walls, steel accents, and a marble facade that gleamed in the soft glow of decorative lights. Parked in the pristine driveway was Michael's shiny black SUV, its glossy surface reflecting the surroundings like a mirror. Victor's jaw tightened as old memories clawed their way back. He could still hear Trisha's voice describing the plush seats and state-of-the-art sound system. Let's see how impressive it looks after tonight, he thought. He climbed out of the cab, hauling out a thick industrial hose connected to the waste tank. The moment the cap came off, the stench intensified, suffocating. He pulled a scarf over his face and crept toward the SUV. Flipping a lever, he reversed the suction mechanism, now set to expel. The hose buzzed faintly in his grasp. Curtains up, he whispered. He pointed the nozzle at the rear of the vehicle and opened the release valve. A disgusting jet of raw sewage erupted, slamming into the car with a sickening smack. The mixture clung as it oozed downward, forming grotesque trails over the previously flawless paint job. The grotesque sound of it splashing echoed off the houses, making Victor flinch slightly. In mere moments, the SUV was coated in layers of human waste. He moved slowly along the vehicle, directing the spray with eerie precision, feeling a toxic satisfaction swell with every squelching blast. Part of his mind shouted that he'd lost it, that this was madness, but adrenaline had drowned out that voice. He moved like a machine, targeting the rims, the roof, the windshield. Pools of sludge gathered beneath the tires, swirling like filth-filled whirlpools. Michael's prized machine now looked like something dredged from a nightmare. And Victor wasn't done yet. Defiling the exterior didn't go far enough. Michael needed to feel the violation down to his bones. Victor walked up to the front door and tried the handle. Locked, obviously. But the house was more glass than wall. He went back to the truck, retrieved the crowbar, and headed for a side window. Wedging the metal tool between pane and frame, he pushed and twisted until the wood groaned and the glass burst with a sharp, ringing crack. Clearing the shards with a gloved hand, he made a gap just wide enough to snake the hose through. The foul stench intensified as he lifted it, aiming toward the center of the immaculate living room. He opened the valve again. A vile flood gushed into the house, dousing white furniture, glistening floors, and spotless walls. The sewage clung, splattered, seeped into every crevice. A room once resembling a luxury showroom was now a repulsive swamp. "That's what you get," Victor growled, shaking with raw emotion. "That's for tearing my life apart." Headlights flared across the driveway. He froze. A sleek coupe pulled up near the curb, tires crunching softly over the pavement. The driver's door flew open. Michael stepped out, immaculate in a tailored suit. His face twisted in shock as his eyes landed on the truck and the foul stream pouring through the shattered window. "What the hell?" Michael gasped, reeling back as the stench enveloped him. "Don't move," Victor barked, stepping forward with the crowbar dangling at his side. Michael stared at him, recognition dawning. His expression flickered between disbelief and horror. "You?" Michael choked out. "What's going on? Are you completely out of your mind?" A bitter laugh tore from Victor. "I'm the crazy one? You seduced my fiancée, the woman I was going to marry, and I'm the one who's lost it?" Michael stumbled, bumping against his car. "Trisha told me you two had some kind of understanding. She said it was complicated. You can't do this, man." "There was no deal," Victor snapped, stepping closer. "No agreement. She lied. You lied. Now you're both going to choke on what you created." Suddenly, Michael bolted toward the truck, aiming for the control valve. Victor was faster. He swung the crowbar with a savage arc, smashing it against the truck's body inches from Michael's skull. Sparks leapt into the air. "Touch it and I'll split your head open," he shouted. Michael stumbled back, face pale with shock and fury. "You're a lunatic. I'm calling the cops." Victor pointed the crowbar like a weapon. "Do it. I'll tell them everything. How you manipulated her at the office, how you pressured her. Think your bosses will like that? What about your family? Your spotless image?" Michael hesitated, swallowing hard. "You think this is just about some property?" Victor's voice dropped, trembling with restrained fury. "You think I care about a car? You wrecked my life. You crossed a line stepping into my domain. Just look at the damage." Their eyes followed his gaze to the living room, where the window gaped open like a wound. Oozing through it, a thick, foul sludge surged in waves, swallowing the pristine marble floors. It moved with a sickening rhythm, upending chairs, toppling lamps, lifting rugs into lazy drifts like lost artifacts. The stench clawed at their throats. The destruction looked like something from a fever dream. Then, screeching tires shattered the moment. Blinding headlights cut through the night as a sedan fishtailed to a stop. Trisha's car. The door burst open and she sprang out, dressed for a night out, tight skirt hugging her hips, heels clicking sharply on the driveway, her hair wild and wind-tossed. "What the hell, Victor?" she gasped, recoiling from the overwhelming odor. "What did you do?" Victor faced her, veins humming with rage and adrenaline. "You said you were bored," he said, voice shaking. "Tell me, Trisha, exciting enough for you now?" She froze, stunned, as her gaze landed on the buried SUV, now vanishing beneath a tide of foul waste. "You've lost it," she whispered, stepping closer in disbelief. "I didn't want this." "You don't get to backpedal now," he snapped. "You crept around behind my back like I was disposable." "You're the one who said we should keep things casual," she shot back. "You knew I was seeing other people. I didn't think you'd go this far." His laugh was jagged and joyless. "So you were already with him, huh? Thought I'd just take the hit and smile like a damn fool?" Fury twisted her features. "You don't get to destroy everything just because your ego's bruised. Michael is going to take you to court for this." "Don't count on it," said a new voice, sharp and cold. Michael stepped into view, eyes hard and unflinching. "You said your fiancé was harmless. Now look at him, ready to drag us both into hell. Do you understand how deep we're in it?" Trisha whirled on him, her face blazing. "My fault? You were the one who wanted secret meetings in your office, remember? You promised you'd convince me to leave him. Don't start rewriting history now." Victor let out a dark chuckle. "Oh, how quickly it unravels. Need help tearing each other apart? Let me lend a hand." He strode to the truck and wrenched the valve open wider. Another wave gushed out, slamming through Michael's SUV window with the force of a foul tsunami. Michael lunged. "Have you completely lost your mind?" he bellowed, charging forward. The two men collided with bone-jarring force. The crowbar Victor had been gripping clattered to the pavement. Michael shoved him, but slipped on the slick ground, nearly falling into the toxic pool forming at the curb. Victor twisted loose and drove his elbow into Michael's ribs. The older man stumbled back, groaning in pain. "Victor, please, you have to stop!" Trisha screamed, dashing toward the truck. But she hesitated, overwhelmed. The controls meant nothing to her, and the smell nearly made her vomit. Michael gasped, clutching his side, fury and revulsion on his face. "That's it," he growled, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the cops." Victor stepped forward slowly. "Go ahead," he said coolly. "Just keep in mind, I've got recordings. Trisha raving about your little escapades, how you used your power, how fun it all was. You think your company's going to stay quiet when they hear how many women you pulled into your games? Think HR won't light you up?" Michael faltered, phone in hand, his confidence cracking. "You wouldn't—" "Oh, I will," Victor hissed. "You started this fire. I'm just letting it burn." Trisha covered her face with both hands, barely able to look at either of them. "You're both disgusting," she whispered. "I never should have asked for more. I never should have said anything." Victor's voice turned cold and cruel. "Save the remorse. You flaunted it. Treated me like I was harmless. A joke. So tell me, who's laughing now?" He turned back to the truck, yanked another lever. The flow began to slow, finally losing force. "That's enough," he muttered. Message delivered. The driveway lay drowned beneath sludge and debris. The SUV was buried, the house behind it smeared in filth. The air was saturated with a stench that would cling for weeks. Inside, nothing remained untouched. Michael coughed, eyes stinging, whether from fumes or fury wasn't clear. "You're going to prison for this," he rasped. "Blackmail won't save you." "Go ahead," Victor said with a shrug. "Just know, the board's getting everything, every message, every picture, every disgusting little voicemail, along with Trisha's glowing reviews of your behavior." Michael's hand lowered slightly. His rage dimmed, replaced by something darker, fear. "This is your doing," Trisha said, her voice like ice, eyes locked on Michael. "Mine?" Michael exploded. "You're the one who said he was weak. Don't you dare dump this on me." Victor let out one last dry, bitter laugh. "I always said you two were made for each other," he sneered, circling around to the passenger side of the garbage truck. His hand gripped the door handle like a threat. "Enjoy picking up the pieces." Michael lunged, rage burning through his veins, but Victor held his ground, unmoved. Then his cold eyes shifted to Trisha, his voice cutting like ice. "Get him to stand down, or I make this even worse." Trisha grabbed Michael's arm, her voice rising in alarm. "Don't! He's not bluffing!" Michael quivered, teeth clenched, eyes wild, but he didn't move. Victor didn't spare them another look. He climbed into the cab, slammed the door with finality, and yanked the truck into reverse. Gravel scattered under the tires as the vehicle rumbled backward. In the mirror, he caught one last glimpse. Michael and Tricia standing stunned in the aftermath, sludge up to their ankles, hands shielding their faces. The once luxurious SUV was half buried beneath layers of reeking waste, and from the wide front window of their sleek home, a dark, filthy stream continued gushing into the living room. Victor slammed the accelerator, the truck roaring down the tranquil, tree-shaded street. His chest thundered, driven by a volatile mix of thrill, disgust, and adrenaline. Streetlights flared across the windshield in stark white flashes, the night staring back with unforgiving clarity. The stench clung to him, embedded in his skin, soaked into his clothes, but he barely noticed. He had set something vile and permanent in motion, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like the one holding the reins. He returned the truck to its spot behind the sanitation depot, easing it into place exactly as he'd found it. Almost an hour had passed since he left that house in ruins. Jumping down from the cab, he peeled off the grimy gloves, then wiped at his sweat-streaked face with a dirt-smeared sleeve. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Tricia. He let it ring out. Seconds later, it buzzed again. A message this time. Against his better judgment, he opened it. "You absolute psycho. You wrecked everything. His car, his house. I can't believe how far you took this. If you don't fix this, my parents are going to sue you for every cent they paid for that wedding. Are you listening?" A hollow, bitter laugh escaped him as he powered off the phone. "Fix this," he repeated with a dry chuckle, as if any of it could be undone, as if there was any version of right left to return to. The damage was done. No apologies, no restitution, just a vile, unforgettable memory seared into all their minds. He leaned against the depot wall, catching his breath. Maybe Tricia's parents would lawyer up. Maybe Michael would spin some sanitized version of events. But Victor wasn't worried. He had everything. Screenshots, voice memos, damning receipts. Enough leverage to burn them both to the ground if they pushed back. Let them try. He was ready to salt the earth if it came to that. Staring at the dead screen in his hand, he felt the weight of it. Cold, silent, and immense. He shoved the phone into his coat pocket and walked away slowly, his steps heavy, hands buried deep. No adrenaline now, just quiet. And echoes. Tricia's smug dismissal, Michael's sanctimonious outrage. Let them come for me, he thought. Just try it. But another voice stirred under the surface, a whisper cutting through the noise. What have you become? No answer followed. Only the certainty that the humiliation they dumped on him had been delivered back in spades. And he didn't regret it. Not a bit. The night breeze brushed against his face. The world, indifferent and clean, carried on. Somewhere nearby, lights glowed softly behind unbroken windows, streets unspoiled by sludge and shattered illusions. His old pickup waited exactly where he'd left it. He climbed inside, caught his reflection in the rear view. His face was smeared with grime, eyes hardened and unrecognizable. A stranger stared back at him. "So this is revenge," he muttered. "Filthy business." He turned the key. The engine growled to life beneath him. He didn't look back. He left behind the ruined wedding, the woman who demanded open honesty only when it suited her, and the future that had always been built on a lie. He told himself he was free now, free and reeking of vengeance. One last glance in the mirror, then he pressed the pedal down and disappeared into the searing glow of the city. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.